You know, more movies could really benefit from having an octopus playing drums. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the sixth film in the DCEU, DC's 2018 superhero film, Aquaman. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Aquaman stars Jason Momoa, Amber Heard, and Patrick Wilson, and was directed by James Wan. It tells the story of half-human, half-Atlantean Arthur Curry, who takes up the mantle of Aquaman in order to prevent a war between Atlantis and the human world. Aquaman is a bit of an oddity. Coming at nearly the halfway point of the DCEU, this film was our very first solo Aquaman movie. We had previously seen this iteration of the character in Justice League the year before, but this movie essentially acts as a standalone film, making minor references to the rest of the cinematic universe, but offering up no major crossover attempts, which was admittedly a refreshing move. Despite containing a handful of flashbacks, this movie isn't really an origin story. I mean, Aquaman's already a member of the Justice League at this point. But this movie still functions as an early setup story for him, expanding upon the minimal information and characterization we got in Justice League. For years after its inception, the DCEU was notorious for its dark and dour approach, especially when compared to the MCU. Suicide Squad was a neon-infused outlier, but Aquaman was the movie that felt like an attempted course correction. It was the DCEU's first real foray into colorful comic book silliness, and by bringing in a director not usually associated with this genre of film, it was clear that they were trying to mix things up a bit to rejuvenate and kickstart the languishing franchise. In rewatching this film, the one thing that stands out the most to me is that it just tries way too hard. This is sort of helpful in some regards, but it mostly makes the film feel a bit forced. To be fair, making an Aquaman movie was always going to be a tough job. He's not exactly a cool character in the comics, and I'm sure there were very few people in the world who would point to him as their favorite superhero. As a zoologist, I think it's kind of cool that he can talk to fish, but even I can admit that that's not a particularly useful power in most situations. Aquaman's been the butt of jokes for decades, but the DCEU actively tried to turn that image around and make him cool. He's basically presented as a badass. He's got tattoos, he drinks and swears. With his imposing build and charismatic, albeit dude bro personality, Jason Momoa mostly works as this version of the character, but there's still this nagging try-hard feel to it all. And that feeling extends beyond the character to most other aspects of the movie too. The Atlantean Seven Kingdoms lore, jamming in way too many subplots, introducing far too many characters. It's a bloated film. This movie has quite a few issues, but the writing is where the film really falters. For as big and involved as it gets, the story is surprisingly bland, lacking the intrigue that would have come from a slightly more traditional origin story. The video game level-structured quest at the heart of the plot is interesting enough, but it's bogged down by Atlantean political drama, a shoehorned chemistry-free romantic subplot, and mythical kingdom clashing. So much lore gets thrown at us during this film that we're basically drowning in exposition. And if all that weren't enough, we've got not one, but two villains in the story. Each has some good motivation fueling their villainhood, but neither character is used very well in the story. And we can't talk about this film's writing without discussing the dialogue. Whew, a lot of it's really rough. So many moments of characters dramatically announcing themselves by just yelling their own names, or the multitude of melodramatic one-liners that come across as unintentionally funny. It's a bit tough all around with this one, made even more tricky by the excessive length of the film. This movie approaches 2.5 hours long. Now, I have no problem at all with long movies, if they have reasons to justify their length, but Aquaman just jams all this extra stuff in for the sake of it. This film easily could have been at least 40 minutes shorter, and honestly, probably would have benefited from an hour trim. But despite all of its script issues, Aquaman is a fairly entertaining film. It's a bold, over-the-top, silly movie. There are Maine typhoons, drum-playing octopuses, huge underwater skirmishes with people riding around on war sharks and battle seahorses. It's a frequently goofy movie. Unsurprisingly, it's very visual effects heavy, and there's some inconsistency there. Some of the visuals are pretty good, like the brief tour of Atlantis or the bioluminescent design of some of the creatures, but other visual aspects are underwhelming, like the excessive use of blue screen even during sequences on land. And then the underwater stuff, the CGI hair, the awkward floating movements, it's no wonder they made heavy use of convenient underwater air pockets for many of the scenes. Especially when compared to its DCEU predecessors, Aquaman is a very comic booky movie, full of that light and cheesy early 2000s Marvel movie vibe. Unfortunately, it never fully commits to that big, dumb, fun cheesiness. It holds back, clinging to this notion that it needs to be something more, and ends up taking itself too seriously in the process. There are some superheroes where the serious and dramatic approach works, but Aquaman is not one of them, no matter how tattooed and beer-guzzlingly badass you try to make him. So this film kind of gets stuck, awkwardly straddling that silly, serious line. It's got some fun moments and big superhero spectacle, but for someone who isn't an Aquaman superfan, this movie just doesn't have all that much to offer. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. The biggest pro is how bold this film is. Now, I don't mean that in a courageous, genre-defying way. What I mean is that it just goes all in. It's big and comic booky and a mostly fun spectacle of a film. It takes a character as goofy as Aquaman and turns him into a charismatic, larger-than-life type of protagonist, while embracing all of the silly oddities of the comics. He can talk to fish? Sure, let's throw some battle seahorses in there. Need some music? Well, we've got a perfectly good octopus drummer right over there. Aquaman's certainly a movie that tries too hard at times, but the big, bold style is undeniably entertaining. On the con side, the biggest issue is the script. The writing and dialogue here is pretty awful at times. Everything just sounds so stilted and melodramatic. There's the occasional humorous one-liner thrown in every now and then, but most of the time, this dialogue is intended to be played straight, but comes across as utterly cheesy. On top of that, we've got reams of exposition, lines over-dramatically delivered amongst the most ludicrous of visuals, and an assortment of characters who frequently say their own names like they're Pokemon. This is definitely a script that could have used another rewrite. Or 5. The second con is the story. I suppose this and the previous con could have been combined under a writing or screenplay header, but they're both rough enough to warrant their own cons. On this story side of things, we're faced with an overstuffed but surprisingly bland plot. It's a generic riff on King Arthur and post-Hakuna Matata Lion King that then proceeds to throw Atlantean political drama, a romantic subplot, and a family reunion into the mix. If the story had been trimmed of its seaweed and fat, it could have been an enjoyable 90-minute adventure, but instead, we've got a 2.5-hour-long bloated whale carcass of a story. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Aquaman or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Aquaman 3 out of 5 paws. Honestly, depending on the day, this could just as easily be a 2.5, but it's a low 3-paw day today, so that's what's going down officially. This is a big, bold superhero film that leans into its cheesy comic bookiness and is supported by a charismatic lead, but the poor writing, overlong story, and hit-or-miss visual effects almost sink it. I would recommend Aquaman to people who want a big, colorful comic book movie. It goes all in on the more absurd aspects of its aquatic character, so if you're looking for some big, dumb fun to watch while munching on your popcorn, or Swedish fish, this might deliver. But if you're not a big fan of the character, or would rather see something with a little more substance, or at least a little less cheese, then this might be a bit too waterlogged for you. If you liked Aquaman, I would recommend Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Although coming from the MCU side of the superhero world, this film shares in a lot of the same concepts, however executes them all much better. There's some serious heart underpinning the kingdom politics and succession storyline, and it also features Marvel's version of Atlantis, Talokan, led by Namor. If you're in the mood for another big, dumb, fun popcorn movie from James Wan, you should check out Furious 7. Previously known almost exclusively for horror movies, this film was Wan's first foray into action blockbuster territory. Although it's not a superhero film in the traditional Marvel or DC sense, this movie still features plenty of dumb but entertaining physics-defying heroics. If you'd like to stick with actual superheroes, specifically within the DCEU, you might want to watch Black Adam. It's another DCEU film with an iffy story, but features a charismatic lead and a similar silly serious tonal blend. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Aquaman? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite movie with extensive underwater scenes? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies. The way life should be.